Hey beauties, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be playing in some brand new Huda Beauty Mini Obsession palettes. These are all new. She's come out with some previously, but then we've got some new babies. And the ones that I've got here are Emerald Obsessions, which looks like this. And then I have Ruby Obsessions. This one right here. Amethyst Obsessions, which I think is my favorite out of all of them. And then also Sapphire Obsessions, this blue shade here. Now there's one other one called Topaz, but it was another warm tone palette. I wasn't feeling it, so I decided to skip on that one. I didn't feel that it was necessary. Each one of these is $27, which is really great in my opinion for the amount of products you're getting in here, just like the other ones that were $27. These though are permanent and these are limited editions. So if there's any of these that you know that you want to grab, go ahead and get your hands on them. So what I'm going to do is give you guys just a little bit of information. I'm going to swatch each of the palettes that I have, and then I'm doing an eye look with every single one of these. My eyes hate me right now, but I'm doing an eye look with each of the palettes. The one that I have on right now is the Emerald Obsessions palette. So this one is going to be last, and none of them have lashes on, so you can see all shadow. All right, according to the Sephora website, it just says each Huda Beauty Precious Stones Obsessions, that's the difference between these and the last one, eyeshadow palette is packed with a selection of 9 highly pigmented, creamy, metallic, and duochrome shadows inspired by the rich reflection of gemstones. Packed with stunning shades of amethyst, ruby, emerald, topaz, and sapphire, this palette is perfect for adding a hint of sparkle to the eyelids. The large mirror, conveniently sized palette, and versatile shade collection allow you to create both classic and playful looks that are easy to apply on the go. These are definitely travel-friendly palettes. Now there's no names really on the back or the inside of the palette, but you do get the mirror. In the ingredients it says like gold shimmer 1 and then mint matte, things like that, but I'm not going to sit here and try and read through this, so I'm just going to swatch each of the palettes all on one arm together. So this is the Emerald palette. So we have the first, second, and third row all done together. Next up, we have the Ruby Obsessions palette, Amethyst Obsessions palette, and the Sapphire Obsessions palette. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and get into each one of the tutorials. So I did the purple one alone and then the green one alone, as in they're on both of my eyes. But then I did one of each with the sapphire and the ruby. So let me go ahead, get into those tutorials, and then I'm going to tell you guys what I think at the end. Last shade in the top row in a Zoeva 227. I'm going to concentrate on applying this on the outer V first, just circular motions to buff it in. And I'm going to start working it into the crease and upward as my transition shade. I'm going to take that same shade on a MAC 221 and buff it along the lower lash line. Very last shade in the middle row. I'm going to try and see if I can get this to buff out dry on the outer corner. Same MAC 221. Just kind of stamping it into place and then buffing it out. Getting a little bit of fallout. Not terrible, but it is there. I'm going to work this about halfway into the crease. Last shade in the last row. I'm going to go right around the edges of that purple and kind of smoke it up just a little bit, only on this outer corner right here. I'm going to bring it into the crease just a little bit right in here, smoking it upward right here. Going back in with that original 227, and I'm just blending right around the edges. I'm going to use the center shade on my finger, and I'm going to put this all over the lid. I'm using that same shade wet on a MAC 219 pencil brush, and I'm just applying it to the lower inner corner right here, just about, I don't know, a quarter of the way in. Middle shade, last row, I'm using this wet on a MAC 228. I'm going to apply it to the inner corner and kind of blend it out. And I'm also going to take that dry on a MAC 242 on the brow arch. First shade, middle row, and I'm just going to apply a little bit of that right at the lash base, only on the outer half, kind of blending it in a little bit so it's not harsh. And then I am going to go add mascara. First shade, middle row on a MAC 217. I'm going to start with this on the outer corner, and then I'm going to blend it upward. I'm going to start just blending it upward here. I'm not sure if I want to bring it all the way into the crease yet. With the MAC 221, I'm going to go ahead and take that shade right along the lower lash line. On the inner part of the lid right here, or I guess crease, I'm going to take that lime green, and I'm taking that on a clean MAC 221. I'm going to start where there's no pigment from the blue and then kind of merge them together. I do have to build this one up a little bit. Circular motions to blend it out, and then I'm going to start creeping over to the edge of that aqua shade. Back in with a 217 and the middle shade in the bottom row. I'm going to deepen up the outer crease and work it halfway into the crease as well. Slightly bringing this up to smoke out this outer edge. I'm going to take a tiny bit of that shade on a Wangas number 5. I'm just going to put it right up against the lower lash line about halfway through. And then blend it back out with the 221. MAC 221 and the top middle shade, this is dry. I'm going to pack this on the outer half. It's mainly kind of overlapping that last blue we did, but I'm not going to take it all the way to the edge. Same 242 in the last shade in the first row. I'm going to blend that into the last dark blue we did. Again, I'm using this dry. I'm just kind of pressing it and blending it onto the lid. And then lastly, I'm taking this silver shade. This is a little bit more on the crumbly side, so I'm using it wet on a MAC 228. I'm going to finish off this inner corner. 716 Smoky from Delium. I'm going to use this as a liner. This is the very first shade in the palette. It's not as pigmented as I want, so I'm just going to have to build it up a little bit. Dior highlighting palette and a Zoeva 234. I'm going to highlight my brow arch, as well as a little bit on the inner corner, and then I'm going to go add on mascara and liner to my top waterline. MAC 217 and the middle shade, bottom row, starting on the outer V. Gonna have to build this one up a little bit, but I'm going to be working this into the crease. I'm gonna go ahead and work that shade with a MAC 221 right underneath the lower lash line. First shade in the last row. I'm going to use this to deepen up the crease. Wangas number 5, I'm also going to take that right up against the lower lash line. Trying it wet this time. I'm going to try and soften this up a little bit or make it blend just a little bit better with the last shade in the palette. I could have done that initially, but I wanted to test out that color because it seemed very hard in the pan, but I'm just going in with the last shade in the palette, and you can see it's so much deeper, more vibrant, and I think it blends a little easier. I'm going to run that along the lower lash line real quick too. Same MAC 221 and the first shade in the middle row. Putting that on the outer V as well as the inner V. I'm going to work on just building them up and blending them out. And I am going to take it into the crease, just directly into the crease. Original MAC 221, I'm just going around the edges of everything to blend it out. Last shade in the middle row. I'm going to apply this to the whole entire lid. I'm using my finger to warm it up and press it in. A little bit more of that first shade in the middle row, just to kind of go around the edges of this and deepen it up. Wangas number 5. I'm using that last shade in the middle row wet to run it right along the lower lash line. Last shade in the first row, and I'm going to add a little bit of dimension to the center part of the lid right over top of that dark shade. I'm just using my finger. MAC 228, I'm going to take that same shade and put it on the inner corner. MAC 224 and the very first shade in the palette, I'm going to highlight my brow arch, and then I'm going to go line my inner rim, mascara, and be done. Sorry, I forgot to hit record, but I'm using my Zoeva 227 and that Seafoam Green. I'm starting on the crease and then just kind of working it up as a transition shade, but this does not appear to have very much pigment, so I'm having to really pack this on and add and add and add. I'm going in with my Tom Ford number 13. Just trying to get a little bit more pigment up here in the crease. Or not the crease, the transition area, I'm sorry. Goss number 20, and I'm going to apply that same shade to the lower lash line. Again, I'm going to build it up a little bit. Dipping into the last shade in the third row, I'm going to start deepening up the crease with this. I think this is more of the color that I thought the first shade was going to be, so it's still not as dark as it is in the pan. Again, with that same shade on the Wayne Goss number 20, and I'm just going to work it underneath the lower lash line. Third shade in the middle row. This is one of those that you kind of have to press into the skin and then start to kind of wiggle and melt it in before you try to blend it out. Building it up just a little bit, and then I'm going to deepen up just the outer half of the crease. So if you see, when I first go to put this shade on, it doesn't really want to adhere. So I'm like pressing it in and like wiggling it, and then it starts to kind of warm up and start adhering to the lid. You could use your finger too, but because I want to blend this out, like I'd rather use a brush. I'm smoking out just this outer V right here. Wayne Goss number 20 and the first shade in the middle row. Just going to really kind of pack that on the very outer V. I'm not smoking this out or anything. I'm just adding a little bit of intensity just right here. Going in with the very first shade on my finger, I'm going to apply this all over the lid. MAC 242 and the last shade in the palette for a brow arch highlight. Also the inner corner. I'm using a MAC 212 to create a little bit of smokiness right at the lash band with the very first shade in the palette. And then I'm going to go add some mascara. Alright, and this is the finished look. All I did for pretty much every look was put black liner on my inner rim and mascara. I think for the reddish, the ruby one, I put black liner on the lower inner rim as well, but basically a little bit of inner rim liner up top and mascara. That was all I ever did. So let me get into the palettes. I'm going to say that these are pretty consistent with all of the other ones, except I remember I did not like the warm brown obsessions. Like I really just did not like that one. I would say it's pretty on par with the coral one. These two right here are my, I thought I was missing one. My favorites from the last ones are the smoky obsessions. I thought this one worked really, really well. And then I also loved the mauve obsessions right here. Now, out of these three, the Amethyst obsessions is actually my favorite. I thought for sure I was going to have major issues with this shade because like when you touch it, it doesn't seem to have a whole lot of color payoff, and that's kind of the case with a lot of these, that when you just touch them, especially when they're brand new, it feels like, ooh, you're not going to have any color. I'm not going to like you. You do have to work with these palettes. For this palette, for instance, I remember having to take this last shade right here. I think I talked about it in one of my tutorials as well. I think it was this one. When you first take especially a fluffy brush into a shade like this,
it's not going to just lay down the product. So it's not going to be instant impact. It's almost like what you would have to do with your finger is warm it up. So I would get a lot of product on here and press it, and press in kind of tiny little circles to get it to apply with a fluffy brush. And then it was easy to blend out. I was kind of shocked that I was able to do that. This palette, I think I had the least amount of issues with. Again, I didn't use all the shades in here, but I felt like what I used in here, I loved. And I got compliments on that eye look all day long. Even my mom said something about it. I would grab for this palette again. You're gonna have to work with it, and I would suggest using that center shade only on your fingers. And that's another thing I noticed with these palettes. You're gonna get better payoff with your fingers with the shimmery shades. And I know a lot of people don't like to do that. I didn't like to do it previously because I used to wear fake nails, and I don't anymore, so it's not really a hassle for me. You could also use glitter glue. This shade right here, I find that if you use wet, can be a little iffy, like almost sheer. So I definitely suggest the finger for that center shade. And then, like I said, just taking your brush and really working it and warming it up into the skin to get it to adhere with a fluffy brush for the other shades. The matte shades that I used, I didn't have any issues with out of this palette. This one right here, the emerald one, is like a love-hate relationship because I love the look I got out of it, but there's not a lot of pigment here. So this shade right here comes off looking more like this, like it's in between these two. This looks chalky. This is not really going to show up, I don't believe, on anybody darker than me. And I'm probably, like, my face and what the makeup I'm wearing right now is more along the lines of NC20, and that was really having to work to get some pigmentation out of it. So this one is like, I like it and I'm kind of mad at it at the same time, but I think that I will use this one again. I think it's very pretty. I love this eye. I love this green shade right here. I just think it is so stinking pretty, and I actually really like this one. I think that if you're willing to work with the palette, again, it's $27. A $129 palette that is patchy and I have a mess with and I can't get to work. I have a problem with $27 and some effort. I don't necessarily have a huge issue with. Let's move on to the Sapphire Obsessions. This one right here, this green is like almost like almost no pigment at all. Again, if you're darker than me, then like maybe if you use a white base with these and then pack them on, you're probably going to have a better outcome. But if you're going in just traditionally, it's not going to work out very well. The blues, these two here worked perfectly fine. No issues with them. This one right here, again, when you first touch it, it seems like it's not going to work very well. So either use your finger or use that one wet. I loved this top shade. So this one was like right in the middle for me. The one that I wasn't super in love with was, again, I guess it's something to do with the warm tones. I don't know. But the Ruby Obsessions, not enough to where like, oh, I don't like it, I'm going to return it. I like all the palettes. I'm not in love with any of them. Never mind. I think I do love the Amethyst just because the look I think is so pretty. But the Ruby Obsessions, this one I felt like I could get a little muddy kind of easily. The shades in here are kind of, I mean, I have a lot of these shades in general, but even looking at it in person, it doesn't really make me excited. This shade right here mixed with this one like I did on the lid is really cool. This one down here I feel like is a dud. Like even swatching it, trying to get that one to work, wet brush, you're really going to have to put in some effort to get that to work out. This one's pretty light. This one was pretty great. I didn't use the center shade, so out of all of them that I use, this is the one that I would say pass on. And the others, these two, I would say as long as you're willing to work. And then again, this one is my favorite. None of them I think are absolute duds.
Again, they're $27. I think the price point is nice, and I liked all the looks. What do I have on my forehead? Oh my goodness. I liked all the looks that I got out of them, but you do have to add that little bit of extra work with it. I also want to point out fallout. There is quite a bit of fallout. So for me, when I have this much fallout, unless I have powder underneath my eyes, if I have powder underneath my eyes, I really don't care. I'll just leave it there. But usually if I have this amount of fallout, I'll get it and then I just swipe it away consistently as I'm doing the eye, because if it builds up too much, it can be harder to make it go away. So fallout with all of these, there's definitely some chalky shades in probably every one of them, especially the one I have on today. And what was it? I don't remember, but not perfect palettes, but palettes that I like. And for $27, I think you're getting a pretty good deal. Anywho, let me know down below, what's your favorite look? Do you like these palettes? Do you hate these palettes? You know, just let me know. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye, guys.